It's great to have on the call today Mr. Steve Gurney. Hello, Steve. How are you doing?
G'day, Chris. You what up?
Nice to see you today. Steve's got his COVID beard growth going on,
Letting
which,
it all hang out and see what happens. Yeah.
yeah, you look like you might be jumping on a fishing boat, actually, and after this interview and picking up some snapper.
We had a Toastmasters meeting the other week, and where the theme was pirates. And someone said, "Oh, you're so natural, Steve." When I had my patch and my scars on with a beard, so I guess that's the nautical marine theme as well, isn't it?
Just,
I
actually,
hope I hope that's a compliment, Chris.
just show me both hands. I want to see if there's any hooks there or no, they're both hands, not hooks. Yeah, right.
Oh, me hearties. Oh, stop being so silly. Come on, let's get serious. It's a serious thing, this life.
Health and wellness, serious stuff. So thanks for your time today, Steve. Just looking at health and wellness, obviously the globe's massively challenged right here and now. We're talking just before we went on record around effects of COVID and the impacts, and people saying, "Hi, how are you?" And it's like, "Oh shit, what do I say?" What's your long career in as a multisporter, of course, here in NZ? What's your sort of take on the whole wellness principle, Steve? The whole wellness idea. I see it banded around a lot today.
It is, and I've been asked. Thank you, Chris. Yes, I've been asked to talk a lot, especially to farming groups over the last 4 or 5 years. Every August or July, just before calving time, they recognise there's a wee shoulder season there to go and talk to the farmers before the massive stress hits.
Yeah.
And yeah, I wrote a book, Lucky Legs, autobiographical, or I wrote two. So this is the first of those. And I sort of bared my soul. I wasn't going to write the book. I got invites from publishers to write an autobiography, and I really resisted the idea. I thought, well, why? What would someone want to hear about what goes on in my mind? But then the penny dropped after I'd been through retirement from sport and the depression I had for 2 years, really bad depression, suicidal type stuff on retirement. And as after so much soul searching, spirituality courses and reading and research and counseling, that I finally found kind of my answer to the meaning of life, and why I was so depressed. And it was when I said, yes, I will write this book. And it's about being honest. I promised myself when I write the book, I'll just tell it how it is. I'm not going to put any false makeup. I'm not going to, put any filters on this. It's just going to be raw honesty about what I felt, what caused it. And that's, to me, the essence of being mentally healthy is not trying to cover it up. And it's like a volcano or a bottle. If we plug it up and slowly the pressure builds up, one day it's going to blow, and that for some is suicide. And so it's the ability to let the vent out before the cork pops that I think is the essence of mental health. And a good little segue, Chris. You mentioned when we said, "Oh, hi, Steve. How are you?" That's a common greeting we have to each other around the world, actually. But how many of us are actually prepared to hear the truth when we ask that question of someone? You might say, "Well, actually, thank you for asking. I'm having a really shit day." And that, I think, would be more healthy if we could be honest with each other. Well, what is my true answer to how are you?
Yeah, I interviewed Christina Wisnowski in this mini series here. It's on the YouTube channel, and she's brought up that exact point, Steve, around you've got to be prepared for a real answer.
Yes,
you've got to be
yes.
a little bit vulnerable in NZ, because we know NZ, number 8 wire, tall poppy, she'll be right, crack another beer. We've got to actually stop, because some people say, "Hi, how are you doing?" and they're walking past them. It's like,
I know. And I have occasionally said, "Well, actually, thanks for asking." And then you see their eyes glaze over. They don't want to hear your answer. And they'll just sort of say, "Oh, that's nice," and move on without actually acknowledging your replies.
yeah.
So that's right. You have talked about this already with, what was her name?
She's Christina Wisnowski. She's on live. I interviewed her a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
And I think that's a real opportunity for NZ coming out of COVID. When we do ask the question, it's not just it's a nicety throwaway tokenism. It's actually, well, we really want to know. And I'm occasionally a bit cruel to the checkout girl. I'll say hi, and I'll just say, "I'm not feeling too great today," and they're like, You know, I'm just yanking their chain a little bit because if you say, hi, how are you? We want to get beyond the tokenism if we can.
Yeah, well, so let's think about that. So, I mean,
Mm,
I don't want to spend lots of time on this because we already spoke about that with Christina. So, I've got some other stuff I'd like to talk about, but and just a quick, short solution to this thing we're talking about is perhaps it's how we phrase our question: "How are you?" Instead of saying something like that, or "What's the best thing that's happened in your day today?" or "What are your challenges you're facing?" You know, and show some interest in the question, not the usual trot out
yep.
"How are you?" thing, and just change it to something that's not something that's open ended in a real, true way. Or when someone asks me, "How are you, Steve?" Well, you can see their, as I said, see their eyes glaze over if you trot out a certain sort of answer. But how about you say, well, what's an example? Oh, how are you, Steve? You say, well, actually, I've got 2 or 3 good things and 2 or 3 bad things that happened today. So it gets their interest, and
Yep.
you know they want to have it provokes a wee discussion.
Yeah.
That gives them permission. So it's about being tactful and skillful and entertaining. I think entertaining in your reply that invokes a meaningful discussion.
Yeah. I mean, I quite like emotive language. So I kind of like saying, how you feeling? And like, you know,
Yeah.
let's go, I know that most sort of Kiwi guys don't go to the emotive linguistics, but it's actually, well, but you can't say good. You got to be specific on how you feel inside.
Yeah.
And
We can say on a scale of 10, how are you today?
mm,
You know, that they have to think about it, don't they?
yeah, yeah.
Mm.
Just looking at COVID situation, Stephen, prior to going on camera, you're like, oh shit, yeah, the whole COVID experience is massively unnatural to many, many people. How has that impacted your wellness, Steve?
Yeah. So thank you for asking, Chris. I know a lot of us, I've had a few discussions around this lately, and a lot of us are sick to death of the COVID thing. We want to talk about something normal, you know, something, well, no, I don't believe there's ever going to be a normal, but something other than COVID. But I think it warrants a wee discussion on this. I've just had some pretty intense emails to a friend in the USA who's, let me read it. She said, she apologized for not writing because she's feeling a funk lately. She's in a bit of a funk. And I know, and I recognize this because a lot of people have expressed this, including myself. I thought, here I am, Mr. Motivated. I should be out. You know, people expect me to be super organized. You know, we've lost our routine. So Steve's going to have his own routine. He's going to be up at 6 a.m, do press ups and chin ups and out kayaking and whatever he's allowed to do. But I haven't. I found myself sleepy. And this morning, I didn't get out of bed till 9 o'clock or 9:30 or something. And you know, and it's been the case for the last few weeks. And I've done a bit of analysis about why that is. And of course, the bells, I mean, it's a familiar feeling. I thought, we've been here before in the Christchurch earthquakes. And we had an Australian researcher come to visit in Christchurch a couple of times, actually, to help us. And he identified a couple of phases that we're going through. First of all, obviously, is the adrenal phase, because whether we're aftershock, you jump out of your chair and your adrenaline's firing to get you ready to run if you need to. But after those calmed down and we got used to the aftershocks after a few months or maybe a year, he said what you'll probably find is a phase of cortisol. So this is exactly what's happening for us in the COVID world. And I thought it might help to unpack this a wee bit to explain what it is exactly. So it's around routine. So as humans, we love routine. We are just hardwired for it. And it's a very rare human that doesn't crave routine of some sort. You know, it might be in disguise, but it's a routine. And so one of the most useful things is to establish some sort of routine, a different one, of course. But just explaining what the COVID phase is, it's our brains haven't got a chance to rest and recover. So in normal life, you know, we have times where we can go on autopilot. We can, for example, people often describe having driven to work and they can't even remember the route they took today. They knew they drove safely, but it's their unconscious mind, and their mind is having a bit of a recovery. And we don't get that at the moment because everything's different. And we're always listening to the news, you know, how many new cases today, we're listening to the Prime Minister, the kids are home. There's no semblance of the usual routine for most people. And so our brains are getting really tired, and that's why we get in a funk. And that's why we feel, oh, gee, I have to sleep and I can't be bothered getting up. And we find ourselves stuck in front of the TV with the remote at, you know, midnight when we should have been in bed 2 hours ago. It's because we're just buggered. And I think it's, you know, I'm a perfectionist, and there's many of us, and probably I think you probably are as well, many of us listening that will be perfectionists who are particularly hard hit by this lack of routine and this cortisol phase, because we want to do things properly, and our mind's constantly working on how to get it right and get it complete to 100%, and we can't, and our eyes, and we just get overwhelmed and run down. And so I think really important, even though it's hard to swallow this pill, it's really important to take it easy on ourselves. Just give ourselves permission to be lazy. We'll give ourselves permission to not get it right 100%. Give ourselves permission to sleep, and that's okay. We need it. And if you must, which many of us have to, make a routine where you actually build in time to recover. And I think there are things like saying, right, I'm going to go for my walk around the block, or I'm going to just sit and read a book or watch something. What you might have watching TEDx hour, where your mind's just watching. It's a much easier mechanism to watch TV, but make it something useful, than to read a book where your mind has to imagine, or to listen to the radio where your mind has to create visuals. Watching TV allows our mind just to free wheel for a bit. But I think the important thing is to make it useful, productive, positive type TV rather than junk.
I think for me personally, adaptation and agility. Like the first few days, I had my WTF moments, and then fundamentally, Steve, for my children, I had to take responsibility. And I got up in the morning, and it was 7:30 a.m., and I did a semblance of a wheel planner for my young kids, and I had like 10 or 12 activities. And for me, whenever it was like March 24, I had to grab onto a semblance of a routine, as you're pointing out, to give some sense of structure or purpose, even though they're only 3 and 5. So it's perennial chaos, but it's actually, I had to get a grip and take responsibility. And I think when we're thrown into a different challenge or environment or dynamic, you're right. It's that shock and that shock and denial. But then it's actually, when you come out of that, it's a sense of discipline and thinking and self-awareness of self, even though it's an alien situation. And if you've got young dependents, it's actually having that sense of responsibility for them.
Yeah, and that's a nice segue to my second point I wanted to make. I'm just going to push on with my theme. I'm disappointed in myself at first that I haven't got this discipline that I thought I had, and that I'm a lazy bastard. But actually, it's reframing it. It's actually overwhelm. And so one of the things I find it hard to do for myself and the people I've spoken to is actually to love myself enough, and I when I went through that depression and I wrote my book, I developed an opinion, which I'm pretty sure on is correct, is that most humans at some level have a degree that they don't feel they're good enough, or they're not lovable, or something like that. And that creates our personality. That makes us strive to prove it, or to be good enough. But one of the things I found about myself, I think is very common to many, many high achievers and perfectionists, and probably all of humanity, is that we find it hard to actually truly love ourselves. Some Buddhist monks might be able to, but so one of my exercises I have is, how can I love myself so that I feel better about this sort of situation, and I have more motivation and more purpose. And I've just clicked one of the best ways is to model it by loving, or helping other people, make a difference to someone else, because then it gives you permission to love yourself. And so one of the best things I've found to do during this time, these hard times, is like the Prime Minister's been telling us, be kind to one another, but actually go the extra step. Like now that we're at level 2, there's an old widow just around the corner who I know she's on her own. I'm going to go and pick some peaches off the tree and deliver them safely round to her, and I haven't figured out how I'm going to do it safely quite yet, or maybe she comes up here and picks them herself. But doing things like that, we're going out of your way to make a difference to someone else, is actually the first step to loving yourself, is loving your community.
Yeah, it's the beauty in the acts of service, isn't it? And I think the Dalai Lama says, I'm happy when you're happy, and he's happy when he's gifting to the community, gifting love and enlightenment, and that makes him feel so alive.
Yeah.
I was just actually, just as you were talking there about your depression, Steve, when you came out of your athletic career, that high performance phase where you won the coast to coast 9 times, we're seeing it a lot, aren't we, around the globe, from English Premiership footballers to NRL to Kiwis who might have finished Super Rugby. how did you personally supplant that kudos and sense of maybe fame and notoriety from being that athletic figure into, you know, more maybe starting a business or more sort of civvy street? How did you supplement that sense of, I've called it kudos. It might not be kudos in your mind, but you know, that sense of you're at your peak of your game and you're known around the world, and then you've stopped and you've retired. How did you explore supplementing that kudos?
I actually I'm still learning how to do that. So engrossed, so committed to my professional sporting career for 25 years was I, that I didn't give any thought to what happens afterwards, you know. And it's stupid, really. I go around speaking to schools about having a parachute. You know what happens if if you decided to pursue a lot of these young kids I spoke to. Sorry, I just turned my phone off.
No worries.
A lot of these young kids I spoke to had a goal of being perhaps in the national rugby team or making the All Blacks or the netball Ferns or whatever it is, and that's all good and admirable to have a goal. But I said, have a parachute in case that fails, you get injured and you need to go back to some other sort of normal job, which is kind of related to your question here. And so I was a bit hypocritical telling them to do that when I hadn't really figured out what my plan B was going to be. I mean, I've got an engineering degree, so I do have a parachute, but is that where my passion lies? And I hadn't identified that. Maybe we can't ever do that. You can't think to the future that much. But so I'm still discovering how to do that. But the key, I think, is role modeling. I've said, right, what if I can't, I'm not able to do my sport like I was. I don't have that kudos anymore in terms of the present moment ability to do it, but I still have that brand or the kudos in terms of being able to make a difference to other people. So that, I think, is where my effort needs to go now, is putting that wisdom back into the next generation or to others that need it. And that was part of writing autobiographies. It's part of getting on various boards or committees, or doing, like, I'm an ambassador for the Coast to Coast, and that role now largely goes to speaking to schools that are entering teams, because that's the next generation. With the race having been fully subscribed now, what's the best use of my talents? And it's the young people I'm really feeling drawn to, is while their minds are still plastic enough to be able to change their values, that sort of stuff. That's where you can make a big difference. And of course to other adults who are curious about how to be better. But and on that subject of role modeling, I've actually said, right, who are my role models? And Yoda, I know he's fictitious, but he's old, short, and wrinkly, a bit like myself. And I'd like to be wise like that. And I think that also links in precisely with one of the greatest human needs is to feel that they've made a difference. People don't stay at a job. The research shows very clearly people don't stay at a job, for example, for the pay. They stay there because they feel like they're making a difference, or they listen to what they heard, or they can affect the future direction of that company. And I think that's a good metaphor for life, is that, our greatest effect, I suppose, is to be able to make a difference to this world. And how can we best do that with the qualities that we have? There's another little quote that I read somewhere. It says, here it is here. What's my unique ability? If you're not using your unique ability, you're screwing up your life. You're screwing up your attributes. You're screwing up the company that you're working for. You're not making the most of what you might be on this planet here to achieve. So that's one of my biggest goals, I suppose, is to try and identify what is my unique ability that I have different to other people, and how can I help others with that.
Yeah. Do you think over the years, through your 20s, your 30s, this whole wellness thing that's out there, we see wellness in the dictionary of, psychological health, the economic, spiritual. Do you think you transgressed through the decades, through your professional athletic career? And, when you're on the podium at Coast to Coast, did you feel that's really lifting your world of sort of Steve's wellness?
Good question. And this is one of the things I wrote my book about. And in fact, I'll try and give you the short answer here, because we could talk for hours, or I could talk for hours on this. I remember standing on the winner's dais of the Coast to Coast for the first time, feeling, wow, finally done it, because it took me 5 attempts. And I thought, yes, I've made it. I'm there. I finally can be happy. To cut a long story short, I did that 9 times before I couldn't race anymore. And even though I had that happiness, it eluded me in the long term. You know, it was only a short-term happiness. And it was then I stumbled upon Eckhart Tolle's books, The Power of Now and Stillness Speaks and A New Earth. And his teachings, basically, you know, there are many aspects of his teaching, but the one that I want to talk about here is living in the future. You know, we as humans tend to live in the future, that I'll be happy once I've won the coast to coast, then I'll be happy, which says if I'm happy only in the future, then I'm not happy right now. And so that's one of the tenets of his teaching, is that yes, we as humans need to live in the future a little bit for paying our bills and setting goals, but we need to spend as much time as we can in the present moment, because that's where true happiness is. It's the only moment we actually have. And I think that's the trap that we humans fall into over and over and over and over again, is living for something in the future that'll bring us happiness and nirvana, and that we're actually by definition incomplete now, but we are complete right now. And so we see this evidence time and time again by people of our generation, Chris, is, you know, the midlife crisis, and you go and buy a Harley Davidson or something, or grow a beard long, or whatever, you know, or it's a common 50-year-old type of thing, you know, that sort of area of your life. And I think it's driven by this feeling incomplete because we're living in the future too much. And in this time of COVID, I think that's all we can do, because it's all we know. You know, it's so uncertain, and that's why so many of us are upset and discombobulated, is because we can't see what the future is. We can't bloody live in the future because we can't see it, and that's driving us to a panic. And I think it's a really good chance for us to learn to meditate now and to be happy with the present moment, what we actually have. We don't know. Maybe next week COVID's going to kill us all. You know, the planet's going to be bare. You know, who knows what the future holds.
Yeah, certainly some of the prior interviewees, Neve Ross Wallace, who's a mindfulness meditation practitioner, and even just yesterday, Manuela Schmidt, who's a personal trainer. Counterpoint to yourself a little bit, Steve, saying like the world needs this. We need this as a wake-up call. We need this to really connect. We need this to get off our smartphones and running around and doing email at 2 a.m. or what have you. She's seeing the beauty and the opportunity of the COVID crisis for her and her world.
We've seen this with the earthquakes in Christchurch. You know, there was this wonderful bond with community. You know, I remember standing at the end of my street in my pajamas early in the morning for the queue at the Portaloo with a, you know, toilet roll in my hand, and thinking, oh, this is really embarrassing. But there was a queue of my neighbours also doing the same in their pajamas with their toilet roll. And it was a very basic level, you know, and we've seen this time. We hear people talk about this all the time. We're all equal now, the world over. And it is a time we do need this, and it is good. And the sense of community we had in Christchurch was great at the time, but sadly it dissipated over the months. And we all got back to our rushed lives again. And the same's going to happen with this COVID. You know, worldwide we feel a lovely sense of community and all that, but knowing what humans are like, it'll dissipate again once things get back, business gets back on its feet a bit. Yeah. So the trick is to take what we learned from this and try and incorporate a little bit of it. Don't be so, I mean, I'm a perfectionist. I'm trying too hard to be perfect, but so maybe lower my sights a bit and say, well, let's take just 10% of this back into the future and make a daily habit out of it or something.
Yeah. Now, Steve, I know you trained in neurolinguistics. You know, I trained myself in neurolinguistics for mindset. Did you find in that period of your training, that experience through training in NLP, did that improve your sort of inner sense of wellness? Did it give you I don't know, different angles or a toolbox on your mind and on your coaching, perhaps?
Yeah, that's a good point. So NLP gave me an insight how my brain works, but we've got to take a step back from that and say, well, actually, it's just a model. It's someone's model of how our brain works, you know. And so it is with any science, you know, physics, maths. Yep. Someone's written equations that describe how this ball will fall under gravity, and they've got numbers 9.81 meters per second squared, blah, 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 that describes with accuracy or predicts with accuracy how it will happen again in the future. But actually, according to quantum mechanics, we actually don't know. We just think there's a high chance it will happen like that in the future. And so it is with NLP. It's just a model. It's someone's, you know, group, you know, Bandler's and Co.'s interpretation of how brains work. But who cares if it's a model? It's really useful to understand how my brain got to this decision-making process, or this way of being, or this sense of emotions I've got, and be able to control it more so we have a better outcome. It's a bit like, who is it? Viktor Frankl, who said, humans have the ability to put a space between stimulus and response. We can put a gap in there, the thinking space, where animals don't have that. And this is what NLP's done. It's enabled me to put a space in there and say, well, here's the stimulus. How can I best respond to get the best results and happiness in my life? And that's kind of what NLP's done. And so it did make me happier. And it still does today. I use it every day in some way, whether I'm talking to someone or I'm writing an article or whatever. I think, well, what's a better way of saying or writing this? And it has brought me happiness. And I think that's the human brain, isn't it? We have this curiosity about how things work. And it's a dull human, we all know them, who don't have a curiosity about how to be better in life. And they're missing that sparkle in their eye and the wee smile in their face and think, ooh, what's another way of doing this? Or why did I say that? And it links very well, this NLP links very well with Eckhart Tolle's work about being the impartial observer. So, when I do something that I later regret, I think, oh man, that was a dumb thing to say. Instead of being the stupid, saying, Steve, you stupid idiot, and chastising myself, why did you say it like that? The better way to say it is, well, that was interesting, Steve. How could you do that better, more powerfully next time? And this is kind of Eckhart Tolle mixed with NLP, and it's a great way of growing and being a better human.
I'm glad you mentioned curious mind there, because I fully believe that myself. What would you say is your curious mind, Steve, for your own life, future, maybe the next 5-10 years? If we look at the theme of health and well-being, what are your thoughts around boosting that for your own life, for your own future?
Well, yeah, that's another really good question, Chris, that I could take hours to talk about. I think just linking, perfectly to our previous few sentences is, till the day I die, I always want to be learning. And how do you learn till the day you die? Is be curious, and understand. That's the reason why I'm going to miss travel so much. I love traveling because it opens my mind to other perspectives on life. When I visit another culture, I don't go to the cities if I can help it. I go to the backcountry, the villages, the towns, the hamlets, the jungles, to meet other cultures, other beliefs, other religions, other ways of living, because that keeps me curious about what's another way someone could do this. I remember my design class at engineering school, we'd be designing gearboxes and machinery, and so our design tutor would give us a task to design a gearbox or whatever, and he would say, now remember, students, that there's more than one right answer. I'm not looking for the right answer. I'm looking for lots of different answers. Yep. Lots of different ways of doing things. And I think that's a thing to take forward, is to understand, I'm a driven perfectionist, and I can be I want to, have things in control, but you got to understand, I still need to learn, damn it. Yeah. Steve, how can you do better at this? Learn that you can't control everything. Yeah. And that's one thing I want to take forward too, is to let go of my perfectionism and to understand, along with the many right answers there are, what are the things that you can just let run because you don't have enough control over them. You can waste a lot of energy trying to control stuff.
Yeah, I trained as an engineer myself, did chemical engineering, and one of my first sort of mentors said he's a Geordie guy from Northeast England. He said there's more than one way to skin a cat. It's sort of a heinous metaphor, but yeah, it's exactly right. In engineering, there's never one way. So in the lockdown, Steve, what if we talk about self-awareness and developing ethereal knowledge about self, what do you think you've learned about Steve in the last 4 or 5 weeks? What have you learned about yourself?
That I'm not that special after all. My ego is taking a bit of a kick up the pants. And of course, that's another one of the sorry, I'm bringing up Eckhart Tolle a lot, but it happens to relate really well to this conversation. There's another one he said, is that you have to let go of ego, and he talks about the pain body. There's this thing that keeps, you think you've got ego under control and you've squashed it down and you don't have any ego, but actually ego always finds another way in the back door. You think you're being self-righteous, which is ego itself. So I think that's an important point, is that I'm not as good as I thought I was. and to have compassion for myself and others through that.
So when the queue's 150 meters long at New World, sorry mate, Steve, 9 times I know, but get to the back.
well, or turn around. There's more than one right answer. Get back on your bike, go home, come back later. Figure out when the queues are smallest.
Yeah.
That's so true, isn't it? And I saw a funny cartoon, Chris. Speaking of queues at the supermarket, remember when there was, well, in particular, I was over at the professional speakers conference in Australia as lockdown was looming. And the topic of conversation in Australia that week was toilet paper mania. Toilet paper was being stripped off the shelves, and then a cartoon went round, and it has these rescuers coming into a village with their full hazmat suit on, and they're searching for survivors in the village. And they said, one said to the other, well, no, there's no survivors, they're all dead. And the other guy said, yeah, but did you notice they all had clean asses? I thought, what is it about human nature that does this sort of mania? And it's that, once again, it's that ability to put a gap in between stimulus and response, and to think, well, actually, is this necessary? Actually, let's think about it. My grandmother used to always say to me, my sister and I went to stay with them on their farm, and I was about to say something nasty to my sister, as brothers and sisters do. Gran would always say, Stephen, count to 10 first before you say something nasty to your sister. Yeah. It's the same thing. And Grandma was really wise.
Oh, that's hilarious. I'm fascinated by, I know a couple of guys here locally in Christchurch who do extreme pursuits. And one guy I know has just ridden up Mount Everest non-stop, so 8,500 meters. And then he decided about 10 days later to walk the steps in his back section in Kashmir, again, non-stop over 23 hours, doing 8,500 meters of elevation. Now, I'm curious, Steve, with your mindset, your incredible sporting pursuits, and I tried to get this chap on one of these interviews, but he said he's got a face for radio, so...
that only a mother can love.
Yeah. But he's doing this incredible feats. Now, for you doing coast to coast, could you try and encapsulate the sort of spirit or your motivation and your sense of competition and your sense of, chopping your nose off and going through the pain barrier? What was that like?
Chopping my nose off. Well, man, you've got some good questions. You're an expert at this. You should do this. You should make this your job. Oh man, good question. So yeah, after retiring from professional sport, when I went through that really difficult stage and I got some answers, and after a couple of years of navel gazing, I realized that the reason you go through that pain and that length, to those lengths of endurance, I was driven to try and prove something, and pain was, you never even focused on the pain. You're driven by something way more powerful, way more intrinsic. And once again, it's a belief pattern. I was driven by a belief that I wasn't good enough, and I had to prove it by getting in the headlines and on the news as being an incredible achiever. I'm not saying this Everest guy and who did all the stairs in his backyard is like that. Some people do those sorts of things simply for positive role modeling. They're trying to set an example and raise funds. Look at that 101-year-old guy in England who raised how many million pounds. Yeah. How amazing is that? And I'm sure he didn't do it for ego or to prove a belief or disprove a belief. He probably did it because, an old wise guy like that probably did it for really good reasons for the community, for the NSA, was it the National Health Service? And so, yeah, there's a lot of reasons people are driven through pain, to ignore pain. And those guys who achieve incredible things, oh man, this is going to be controversial, but they're probably doing it through imbalance. They're probably doing it because they don't feel they got, for example, these polar explorers, these guys who spend months going to the South Pole or doing something like that, it's an incredibly imbalanced lifestyle, and I've found the same, I found myself at, 56 years old, single, not married, not having had a family, which I really regret now. I really want to. But it didn't even occur to me at those younger days when I was the ideal time to find a wife. It was because I was just driven to prove something else, which was imbalance, you know, the belief that I wasn't good enough, and instead I could have had a nice balanced lifestyle of creating a family and feeling the joy of fatherhood and all those things that you feel, Chris, you know. And so yeah, high achievers, and I'm being controversial but probably true, high achievers are usually imbalanced and, you know, psychologically a bit stuffed up.
Yeah. Well, it might be they're filling a need that it's in an extremity.
It is filling a need, but they're chasing the wrong need. You know, that, like Eckhart Tolle says, they're trying to live for a future that actually isn't there. It's not, because the present is is where happiness lies. And so they are trying to fulfill a need. You're dead right.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously being a fierce individualist sport in multisport, Steve, have you ever, I was curious whether you'd done any team in your teens, 20s, you know, rugby, cricket. Did you enjoy the team sense of sport? Because obviously most people know you for doing an individualist sport.
Yes, that's true. No, I was useless at rugby at school. You know, I was too slow because I'm an endurance athlete. Didn't realize at the time. I would have passed the ball to me because I'd always get tackled. I was too slow. But yeah, you know, create a 24-hour game of rugby and I'll be the best. But the team aspect didn't come in until adventure racing, and was it 1993 or something like that, when the very first Raid Gauloise happened here in New Zealand, organised by a French company, and we put a team together of 5 athletes, Kiwis, to race against all these European teams, and we won, you know, quite handsomely. And the 3 Kiwi teams won first, second, and third. Our team was the leading team, and that's, you know, where my team sport began. But you know, I wasn't ever very good at team dynamics. And once again, it's because of that belief I had, you know, and it's a lack feeling like I have to prove myself, and I always felt competition within the team. You know, John Howard, our team leader, was always the one that the media spoke to, and I felt, you know, quite pissed off that no one really wanted to come and interview me, and so that competitive sort of lack of feeling, I didn't feel important enough. And you know, had I known what I know now, I would have been a much better team player.
Yeah.
So yeah, good question again. Yeah, the individual athletes tend to be super driven and quite egotistical, and I was a bit egotistical and arrogant in those days, and probably am still now, but at least I know it. And those days I didn't know it, and I think that's another of the key things is to be present enough to observe it and know it. The first step to changing any behaviour is to be aware of it, and you know, and be able to, once again, I keep coming back to this, put that gap in. And when you notice the behaviour happening, then stop and think, oh, how could I count to 10 and do something better?
Yeah.
And I actually have a belief you can't change your personality. You know, if I'm a driven sort of guy, you know, I'm not ever going to be able to change my personality. I think it's set in your childhood. But the only way you can make a difference, and it works, is to be aware of it and then consciously choose something else, because personality is unconscious behavior. So if you can be aware and observant without judging, then you can change your own behavior.
It's fascinating around, you know, the topic of self-esteem and reading what psychologists and clinical psychs have to talk to, you know, in the sense of our esteem of ourself and our self-image. And there's one definition that it's, you know, self-esteem, how we feel about ourselves, is the quality of our interactions and connections with other people. So if we have poor connections with other people around us, potentially that will lower our sense of connection and self-esteem.
Yes, that's true. Community is important. Social connection, yes.
Yeah, and of course, the COVID crisis has put an axe through our social norms, and you know, potentially the extroverts have been bouncing around walls, and it's really challenged us to think and be still. And Manuela yesterday on the interview said, "Look, if it's teaching us to be alone with our thoughts and be quiet and peaceful and wistful and reflective, how can that be a bad thing for individual minds, families, and humanities?"
Yes, and that brings up another point I'd like to make is you talked about NLP. So that's largely about linguistics, noticing, you know, what's the language we use ourselves and other people use. And oh man, it so rolled me when this first word, you know, this first concept of social distancing, you know, what a crap phrase that was. Because that's what we don't need. We're social beings. We need connection. And so it's not social distancing, it's physical distancing, or creating a buffer or something like that physically. And we can still talk to each other from 2 meters apart, or across the road to the neighbors or over the fence. And that's critically important. I think that was one of the biggest mistakes of governments worldwide, is to coin that phrase. And well, if they did coin the phrase, at least, in fact, sometimes it's more powerful to start with that phrase and then change it and explain why to the population, because then they understand the concept. So it's about teaching. And so I think I think we're still going to pay the price for this. There's some of the suicidal thoughts that are going there from lonely people, but was it Manuel, whatever it is? So I think that's a good point that he made, that Manuela. So I didn't hear the interview yet. So isn't that a cool word? Speaking of linguistics, a little 3-lettered word called yet. Oh no, I can't do that. Yet. Opens the whole world to possibility. Isn't that amazing? Language is so important to changing our state of mind. Where was I? So yeah, Manuela. Oh yeah, so on that note, I heard an interview yesterday about introverts versus extroverts, and the latest research is showing that most of the population actually is introvert. And someone was suggesting that maybe this is evolution, because pandemics like COVID and other flus from the past have tended to infect those people who like to socially congregate and touch a lot. And so it kills that DNA is culled from the human gene pool. And that perhaps, it's just a theory, it's just a model.
Yeah.
Perhaps that's explaining a bit about why we have evolved as largely introverts, and that we actually could find this isolation from the disease quite useful to learn to be mindful.
Yeah. I think it'd be great, another discussion about the whole introvert, extrovert. For me, it's a bit polarizing. And I know some around me self-label themselves one thing. So they say to themselves, I can't do this because I am this.
How true is that? It's just a label. It's just a box that we're using for a particular point of view that we're trying to make. And we're all on the spectrum, just somewhere on the spectrum. We're not at either or, it's somewhere on it, and we can shift.
100%, Steve.
I've been doing the Myers-Briggs thing, a couple of times, and I noticed I've shifted on the introvert extrovert scale. And it's also contextual, isn't it? It depends on what environment you're in.
Yeah. When we look at health, wellness, Steve, and mental health, you brought this up, and thank you for your candor and being straight up. What would you, through COVID, through where we are now in NZ with mental health, and we know the statistics are really appalling for us, especially youth suicide, and what would you, if you had, say, a minute with Jacinda, hypothetically, what in sense of some ideas or thinking for countering and looking at mental health right here now in New Zealand, what would you say? Perhaps galvanized through your own personal experience, what would you say to her?
Damn it, you've got some good questions. Where do you come up with these questions? First of all, I'm grateful, that we have a leader, whether you agree with the Labour policies or not. What a fantastic leader we've had in terms of, she has shown an aspect, while still remaining powerful, she's shown an aspect of her personal self by showing empathy. And I think that's one thing that's missing from many leaders, is to say, look, I understand this is going to really upset some of you. I know how it feels. So, I think that's a really good example to carry forward, and we can all learn from her wonderful leadership skills. But if I was to, there is number one, is that's good role modeling and empathy, is we really need to stop and listen to other people instead of trying to spout off about how it is for us and our ego saying all about me. It's actually stop and notice how is that person experiencing the world? What's going on in their view of the world, or how do they filter, and what are their beliefs and values, and how can I connect through that? Because we all know that's important, that we're social beings and we connect. And that's one of the really important thing for mental health, is to feel like someone else understands. And so we have to understand, we actually have to learn to do that more. And in this hurried world of look at me, and all the movies we see on TV, largely American style, or it was all about being heroes and blah, blah. That's all ego. So we have to put our ego aside and actually notice, what's it feel like in the other person's shoes. That reminds me of a little story. Before you criticize someone, run a mile in their shoes.
That's right.
That way you're a mile away and you've got their shoes. Well, that's not the intention of it, but it is important to put yourself in someone else's shoes. So that's number one. Another thing I've personally learned is about mental health. There's a phrase that says, "What you resist persists." So if you resist something and push it away, it's just going to constantly be knocking you there. So in terms of mental health, if there's some issue that we have, some sort of mental inadequacy or something that you understand and you realize, but you're trying to resist it, then it's a good metaphor is, there's two metaphors I've got for this. Is I did Fight for Life, the boxing thing, charity fundraising thing one time. And I'd often thought boxing was a stupid sport, but I couldn't actually criticize it fully until I tried it myself. And now I can 100% say it's a dumb sport. It's Neanderthal, stupid. The whole aim of it is to incur brain damage in the other person. Now, how ridiculous is that in our evolved society? So I think boxing should be banned. But I do want to compare it as a metaphor. So boxing, it's about confronting and smashing each other like this. And that's kind of resisting, persisting. So if you resist something, it's going to fight back and get you. There's another martial arts, I forget the name of it, where the idea is if someone comes running at you, you stand aside and let them, their own momentum self-destruct. And you might trip them up as they go by. So you're using their own energy. You're not putting in energy. You're not confronting and clashing. You're just encouraging them to keep going and self-destruct. And so it is with what you resist persists. So if I'm feeling lonely, I don't want to resist it. I want to own it, accept it, and then watch it pass on through. And so it is with, you live out near Sumner in Redcliffs in Christchurch, and I'd often go for a walk along the beach to the cliff at the end, and you'd see the long tendrils of kelp growing off the rocks in the sea. And behind it was a cliff. And so a wave would come in, and the tendrils of kelp would just move with it. The wave would pass, but then the wave would go smash on the cliff. And the same thing again. The kelp's moving and letting it pass, the loneliness pass, but the cliff by comparison is resisting, and there's an awful mess of smash of waves and water and bubbles, and it's a lot messier. So I think that's one of the things about mental health is accept it. If you're feeling depression, well, accept it, own it, get some help if need be, which most people do. I did, lots of it. And then it's only through that it can pass on by and you can grow and move on forward. But if you keep saying, no, I don't have it, I don't want to talk about it, you'll always have it. There's no opportunity for it to pass by. So I think that's some advice I'd like to talk to Jacinda about is how do we enable that level of sharing but moving on by to be an official part of the Kiwi lifestyle. There's a trend over the last 4, 5, 6 years to talk about mental health and depression, with the John Kerwins and all that, all these lovely role models out there. But I fear that it's going to be too trendy. So, I'm depressed. And it's a label that we wear. I'm depressed, and this is my excuse, my handicap in life. I'd like to say, yes, I am depressed, but not wear it as a label and move on through it. I think that's the piece that's missing. Is some more strength around how do we move past it, let that the loneliness pass on by. And I'd like to see more effort put into training methods around that. I'm not sure what it looks like, but that's where I'd like to put some energy.
Awesome, Steve. Hey, thank you so much for your time today and your candor and honesty with your storytelling. We connected a few years ago. Now, I know you're doing some professional speaking at the moment, Steve. If someone's watching this video, how can they get a hold of Steve Gurney?
Steve at stevegurney.co.nz. You do a Google search, you'll find my website.
Yep.
021 Gurney. That's a word number.
Woohoo! And now you're off to jump on your sailing boat up Lake Wakatipu to pick some...
No, not allowed. Not allowed yet. Kayaking.
Level 1, level 2, level 3.
Level 3, we're allowed to kayak. So I've been kayaking with my neighbour. That was great. 2 meters apart, of course.
Yeah. Nice.
Lake Wakatipu is beautiful at this time of year. All the reflections of the orange and red leaves on the trees. The Murakam Lake at this time of year is quite peaceful.
Beautiful. As you can see, we've got a little visitor in the room here, vying for my attention. So we'll talk soon, Steve. Thanks so much again.
Thank you. Lovely questions, Chris. Very insightful. Thank you.
You're welcome. And I'm sure viewers will take a lot away from that.
Power to you all. Go forth. Make a difference. Be powerful role models.